Taiwan shuffled through the rain-slicked streets of Seoul, shoulders hunched beneath his worn jacket. Another ordinary Tuesday for an ordinary engineer. His phone buzzed. A message from Krell's assistant requesting his immediate presence at the Navarian embassy. Strange timing, considering he'd just had dinner with his alien friend 3 days ago. The towering crystal structure of the embassy gleamed against the night sky. Taiwan had visited before, but never like this, escorted by somber-faced guards through silent corridors. The ambassador's expression told him everything before words could. "Krell is dead," the ambassador said, his translucent skin rippling with the pale blue of formal mourning. His shuttle experienced catastrophic failure during atmospheric re-entry. Taiwan's knees weakened. Krell, with his booming laugh and fascination with human poetry, gone. They had bonded over late-night talks about engineering challenges and cultural differences, their friendship unlikely but genuine. "There will be a formal reading of his final wishes tomorrow," the ambassador continued. "Your presence is required." "Required?" Taiwan repeated. "I'm just his friend. Surely his family." "You were his chosen friend," the ambassador interrupted. "In Navarian culture, this carries significant meaning." The next day, Taiwan found himself seated in a chamber filled with important-looking Navarians. Their skin tones shifted through shades of blue and green. Emotions Taiwan couldn't interpret. A holographic projection of Krell appeared, startlingly lifelike. "If you're viewing this, my atoms have returned to the cosmic flow," the projection began, Krell's 4 eyes blinking in their characteristic pattern. "To my friend Taiwan Kim, I leave all earthly and non-earthly possessions. My residence in the diplomatic quarter, my personal spacecraft, my collected artifacts, and financial assets totaling approximately 8 million Earth dollars. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Taiwan sat frozen. $8 million. A spacecraft. This had to be a mistake. Furthermore, the hologram continued, in accordance with Navarian tradition, "I entrust to Taiwan the protection and companionship of my wife, Gina. May your shared grief become shared joy in time." The room fell silent. Taiwan looked up to see a female Navarian rising from among the officials. Unlike the blue-tinted males, her skin had a silvery sheen that caught the light as she moved. Her eyes, large, violet, and unmistakably sad, met his across the room. "This is unprecedented," someone whispered loudly. "A human cannot fulfill the role of Shasmakar." The ambassador raised his hand for silence. Krell's wishes were properly documented and sealed. "According to our treaty with Earth, we must honor them." Taiwan found his voice. "There must be some mistake. I didn't know Krell was married. He never mentioned. Our union was recent." Jaina spoke for the first time, her voice melodic despite the translation device, and private, for reasons of diplomatic sensitivity. After the ceremony, Taiwan found himself in a sleek transport heading toward what was now apparently his home, a beautiful house overlooking the Han River. Gina sat opposite him, her posture perfect, her 4-fingered hands folded in her lap. "I understand this is shocking for you," she said when they were alone. "It was not my idea." "I don't understand any of this," Taiwan admitted. "Why would Krell do this?" "My husband trusted you above all others," Gina replied. "On our world, when someone dies, their closest friend becomes responsible for their family. It is a sacred trust. But I'm human. I don't know the first thing about Navarian customs or how to be a, whatever that word was." "Shasmakar," Gina supplied. "It means shield after death. You are not expected to replace Krell. Only to ensure I am not alone in a foreign world." The house was beautiful, all curved walls and windows that adjusted their opacity at a touch. Taiwan stood in what must have been Krell's study, surrounded by objects from across the galaxy. "This is really mine now?" he asked, running a finger along a shelf of strange books. "Everything is yours," Gina confirmed from the doorway, "including responsibility for me." Taiwan turned quickly. "You're not property. I would never think of you that way. Her silver skin rippled with a pattern he couldn't read. Of course not. I am a person with my own will. But in our culture, a widow is vulnerable. The Shasmikar provides protection, companionship, and, she hesitated, a home, if needed. Do you need a home? Don't you have family? My family is complicated, and Earth is my home now. I am a linguist at the embassy. Before Taiwan could respond, a chime sounded. Gina touched a panel on the wall, revealing a Navarian official on the screen. The Embassy Council requests your presence tomorrow, Gina, and your human protector as well. There are concerns about this arrangement. After the call ended, Taiwan sank into a chair that adjusted to his human form. They don't like me having Krell's things. They don't like a human serving this Shasmikar, Gina corrected. It's unprecedented. And she trailed off. And what? Krell had enemies, powerful ones. This inheritance places you in their sights. That night, as Taiwan tried to sleep in one of the guest rooms, he couldn't bring himself to use Krell's bedroom. He heard sounds from the study. Investigating, he found Gina inserting a crystal into Krell's computer. "What are you doing?" he asked. She startled. "Forgive me. I was searching for something Krell mentioned before he left." He was worried. The computer projected an image of stars, then zoomed in on what looked like a space station. Text scrolled rapidly in Navarian script. "What is that?" Taiwan asked. Gina's skin paled to almost white. Evidence. Krell believed his research had uncovered something dangerous, something people would kill to keep secret. Kill. You don't think his shuttle accident was? I don't know, Gina whispered, but I believe we should assume nothing was accidental. She removed the crystal and handed it to Taiwan. This is why he chose you. Not just because you were friends, but because you have the skills to understand what he found. Taiwan stared at the small crystal in his palm. Yesterday, he had been an ordinary engineer with an alien friend. Today, he had inherited millions, a spaceship, and a beautiful alien widow who was suggesting his friend had been murdered. "Will you help me?" Gina asked, her violet eyes searching his face. "Will you be the shield Krell believed you could be?" Taiwan closed his fingers around the crystal. "I don't know if I can be what Krell wanted, but I owe him this much. I'll help you find the truth." Gina's skin sparkled with relief. "Then we begin tomorrow, after we convince the Embassy Council not to nullify your inheritance." As she left the room, Taiwan looked out at the Seoul skyline. Somewhere out there were answers, and possibly the people responsible for Krell's death. His ordinary life had vanished as completely as the rain clouds that had drenched him just yesterday. The Navarian embassy resembled an ice palace, all smooth curves and reflective surfaces that made Taiwan feel plain and out of place in his best suit. Gina walked beside him. Her silver skin adorned with intricate patterns he now understood were formal markings of mourning. 5 senior Navarians awaited them in a circular chamber, their blue-tinted skin shifting with emotions Taiwan couldn't interpret. "This arrangement is unprecedented," began the eldest, Ambassador Lorne. "A human serving as Shasmikar to a Navarian widow violates cultural norms established over 10,000 years. Taiwan cleared his throat. "With respect, Ambassador, I didn't ask for this role. Krell chose me." Krell was. The ambassador paused, searching for a diplomatic word. Unconventional. His fascination with humans was well known, but tradition exists for a reason. Jaina stepped forward. "The law is clear. A Shasmikar chosen through proper ritual cannot be dismissed without evidence of unworthiness." Her voice remained steady, but Taiwan noticed her hands trembling slightly. Has Taiwan demonstrated unworthiness? The council members exchanged glances. "Not yet," replied a female counselor, her tone implying it was only a matter of time. "But there are practical concerns. Does he understand the obligations, the cultural nuances, the potential political implications? Unwilling to learn, Taiwan said. Krell was my friend. Ambassador Lorne's skin darkened. Friendship is not enough. The Shasmakar must provide protection, guidance, and spiritual support according to our ways. The council proposes a compromise, announced another member. The human may retain the financial assets and property, but Gina will be assigned a proper Navarian Shasmakar, someone who understands our customs. Gina's skin paled to almost white. That is not what Krell wanted. Krell is dead, the female counselor said bluntly, and you need proper protection. Taiwan felt a surge of protectiveness. May I ask what happens if I refuse this compromise? Then we contest the will through diplomatic channels, Ambassador Lorne replied. The process would be lengthy, during which all assets would be frozen and Gina's status would remain uncertain. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Taiwan glanced at Gina, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. I need time to consider, he said finally. Outside the embassy, rain had started falling again. They walked in silence toward the sleek vehicle that Taiwan still couldn't believe belonged to him now. They're afraid, Gina said once they were inside, not just of breaking tradition, but of what Krell discovered. You think they know about his research? Some might. Others simply fear change. She touched the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. On my world, a widow without a Shasmakar has no status, no protection. That seems archaic. Jaina's expression softened, perhaps to humans, but our lifespans are much longer than yours. These customs evolved when wars lasted centuries and grudges spanned millennia. She hesitated. There is something else you should know. The role of Shasmakar is not merely protective. What do you mean? In ancient times, it was common for the Shasmakar to eventually become the widow's new mate. Taiwan nearly choked. New mate? As in? Yes, Gina confirmed, her skin flushing slightly purple with what he guessed was embarrassment. It is no longer an expectation, but the possibility is why the council is so resistant. The idea of a human and Navarian pair bond is controversial. Before Taiwan could respond, his phone chimed with an alert. His bank wanted to verify unusual activity, someone attempting to access Krell's accounts, which had been transferred to his name that morning. It's starting already, Gina murmured. They will not wait for legal channels. Back at the house, Taiwan found himself struggling with the most basic aspects of his new life. The food synthesizer produced meals he couldn't pronounce. The shower had 16 settings, none labeled in Korean or English. Even the bed adjusted to his body in ways that felt invasive rather than comfortable. Gina helped where she could, showing remarkable patience. Krell admired humans' adaptability, she said as she reset the environmental controls that had Taiwan sweating profusely. He said it was your species' greatest strength. I'm not feeling very adaptable right now, Taiwan admitted, examining what appeared to be a toothbrush, but hummed alarmingly when activated. Gina took it from him gently. This is for exfoliating scales. You wouldn't want to put it in your mouth. That evening, as they shared a meal of foods safe for both their species, Taiwan broached the subject they'd been avoiding. We need to examine that data crystal more carefully, he said. If Krell was murdered because of what he discovered, we're both in danger. Gina nodded. I've been thinking the same. But Krell's computer system is keyed to his biometric signature. I've been trying to bypass it. But maybe I can help, Taiwan offered. I'm an engineer, remember. Working together, they spent hours trying to access the crystal's contents. Taiwan's technical knowledge combined with Gina's understanding of Navarian systems slowly yielded results. Just before midnight, the computer chimed and projected a holographic star map. It's working, Gina whispered excitedly. The map zoomed in on a remote sector of space, highlighting what appeared to be an artificial structure. That's not on any official chart, Gina said, her voice hushed. What was Krell investigating out there? Before Taiwan could respond, all the lights in the house suddenly went dark. Emergency illumination kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie blue glow. Security breach, announced the House AI in Navarian, then repeated in Korean. Perimeter compromised. Gina moved with surprising speed, extracting the data crystal and pressing it into Taiwan's hand. "Take this," she whispered. "The rear garden has an escape tunnel." Krell was always prepared. "I'm not leaving you," Taiwan protested. "You must," Gina insisted. "As my Shasmakar, your duty is to protect what Krell discovered. It's more important than either of us." Before he could argue further, they heard the sound of the front door being forced open. Gina pushed him toward a concealed panel in the wall. "Go," she urged. "I will delay them." "We will meet at the secondary location," Krell established. "The place he took you 3 months ago." "The observatory?" Taiwan asked, remembering a night spent stargazing with Krell at a private facility outside the city. Gina nodded. "Tomorrow at sunset." "Now go." As Taiwan slipped into the hidden passage, clutching the crystal that had cost his friend his life, he realized how quickly he'd gone from ordinary engineer to fugitive. Somewhere between inheriting millions and running for his life, he had accepted a responsibility that went far beyond cultural traditions or legal obligations. He was Gina's Chasmakar now, her shield against whatever dangers Krell had uncovered. And somehow, in less than 48 hours, protecting her had become more important than his own confusion or fear. Taiwan reached the observatory just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The small dome sat isolated on a hilltop outside Seoul, surrounded by pine trees that swayed in the evening breeze. His muscles ached from a night spent hiding in an internet cafe, trying to make sense of the fragmented data on the crystal using a borrowed laptop. He approached cautiously, remembering the night Krell had brought him here. "Humans look up and see stars," Krell had said. "Navarians look up and see home." It had been a rare moment of homesickness from his usually cheerful friend. A shadow moved near the entrance. Taiwan froze until Gina stepped into view. Her silver skin darkened with what appeared to be some kind of cosmetic to make her less noticeable. "You made it," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I was worried." "Who were they?" "The people who broke in." Gina glanced around nervously. "Inside. It's not safe to talk here." The observatory's interior was cool and dark. Gina activated the security systems, sealing the doors and engaging privacy screens that made the dome's transparent sections opaque. "They were Navarian security forces," she explained, "but not acting on official orders. I recognized one of them as part of a faction that opposes cooperation with humans." Taiwan connected the crystal to the observatory's computer system. "I've managed to decrypt some of the files." Krell was tracking shipments between Earth and a location not on any official star charts. The computer displayed shipping manifests, financial transactions, and surveillance images. Gina studied them intently. "These are components for quantum resonance technology," she said, pointing to lists of equipment. "Highly restricted. Navarians don't share this with any species." "What does it do?" "It can manipulate matter at a subatomic level. In peaceful applications, it creates new materials. But weaponized," she shuddered, "it could destabilize atomic structures from a distance." Taiwan scanned through more files. "According to this, both human and Navarian officials are involved. There's a research facility." He stopped as coordinates appeared. "It's here, on Earth, in the mountains north of here." Jaina's eyes widened. "That's why Krell brought you here specifically. He knew the facility was nearby. He was planning to show you." The realization hung between them. Krell hadn't just been investigating. He'd been preparing to act, with Taiwan's help. "We need transport," Taiwan said, "and supplies." Gina touched a panel on the wall, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside sat emergency rations, weather-appropriate clothing, and a small device Taiwan didn't recognize. "Krell prepared for contingencies," she explained. "This is a short-range personal transporter. It can move 2 people up to 50 kilometers. Taiwan stared at the device. Like teleportation. That's real. Very energy-intensive and slightly dangerous, Jinnah admitted, but faster than hiking through mountains. They spent the night studying Krell's data and planning their approach. As they worked, Taiwan noticed how their initial awkwardness had faded. Jinnah no longer seemed like an alien widow thrust upon him, but a competent partner with insights he lacked. "Your engineering knowledge is impressive," she said as he identified a potential weakness in the facility's power systems. "Krell was right about you." "What else did he say about me?" Taiwan asked, curious. Jinnah's skin rippled with a pattern he now recognized as fondness. "That you see problems where others see impossibilities. That your mind works in unexpected ways." She paused. "That you were the only human he trusted completely." Morning brought clear skies and determination. They programmed the transporter with coordinates from Krell's files and stood close together as Jinnah activated the device. The world dissolved around them. Taiwan felt a sensation like being pulled through water, then sudden solidity as they rematerialized on a forested mountainside. "You," he groaned, fighting nausea. "That was unpleasant." "Be grateful we arrived intact," Jinnah replied, adjusting her perception filters, lenses that made her alien eyes appear human to casual observers. According to Krell's data, the facility was disguised as a private research center for environmental studies. They approached cautiously, noting the minimal visible security that belied the importance of what lay inside. "There," Jinnah whispered, pointing to a service entrance partially hidden by vegetation. Krell identified that as our best entry point. Using access codes from the crystal, they slipped inside, finding themselves in a maintenance corridor. Taiwan felt his heart pounding as they navigated through the facility, avoiding the few staff members they encountered. "The main laboratory should be 2 levels down," he whispered, consulting a schematic on a small handheld device. They located a service elevator and descended. When the doors opened, both froze in shock. Before them stretched a vast chamber filled with equipment, some clearly Navarian, some human, some a hybrid of technologies that shouldn't exist together. "This is worse than Krell suspected," Jinnah breathed. "They're not just experimenting with quantum resonance. They're building a prototype." In the center of the lab stood a device unlike anything Taiwan had ever seen, a pulsing core surrounded by concentric rings that occasionally shifted position without any visible mechanism. "What exactly would this do?" he asked. Jinnah's expression was grim. If deployed in orbit around a planet, it could selectively destabilize specific targets, military installations, cities, even individuals without detection. The perfect assassination weapon or tool for covert warfare. Who would build such a thing? "Those who profit from conflict," she replied. "There are factions among both our peoples who believe cooperation is weakness, who think that eventually one species must dominate." Taiwan moved to a computer terminal. "We need evidence, proof of who's behind this." While Jinnah kept watch, he accessed the system using techniques he'd learned from Krell. Files flowed across the screen. Project reports, communications, funding sources. "Got it," he said eventually. "A joint operation between a human defense contractor and an Navarian separatist group. They're calling it Project Harmony, ironically enough." Jinnah joined him. "We need to download everything." As they worked to transfer the files, an alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed throughout the facility. "Intruder alert," announced a computerized voice. "Security protocols engage." "We've been detected," Jinnah said unnecessarily. "We have what we need. We should go." They ran for the elevator, but the doors remained firmly shut. Security shutters began descending over exits. "This way," Taiwan shouted, spotting an emergency stairwell. They burst through the door just as they heard voices approaching. Up they climbed, pursued by the sound of booted feet. When they reached the ground level, they found their original entry point sealed. "The transporter," Jinnah reminded him. We can use it to escape. Taiwan pulled the device from his pack, frantically inputting coordinates for the observatory. As armed security forces rounded the corner, Gina pressed her body against his, one arm wrapped protectively around him. "Now," she urged. Taiwan activated the transporter. As the world began to dissolve around them, he heard the unmistakable sound of weapons firing. Gina's body jerked against his, and her grip tightened painfully. When they rematerialized at the observatory, Gina collapsed to the floor. A spreading purple stain marred her silver skin where an energy weapon had struck her shoulder. "You're hurt," Taiwan gasped, kneeling beside her. Gina's eyes found his. "A Shasmakar protects," she whispered. "But it seems I protected you instead." As Taiwan frantically searched for medical supplies, he realized how completely his world had changed. 2 weeks ago, he'd been an ordinary engineer. Now he was fighting a conspiracy that threatened 2 worlds, with evidence that could topple governments, alongside an alien woman who'd just risked her life for his. And somehow, none of it felt as strange as it should have. Because somewhere between inheritance and investigation, Gina had become more than an obligation. She had become his partner. Taiwan's hands trembled as he applied the healing gel to Gina's wound. The strange substance glowed faintly purple as it sealed the damaged tissue. Gina winced but remained still, her violet eyes never leaving his face. "We can't stay here," she said once he had finished. "They'll track the transporter's energy signature." "You need rest," Taiwan protested. The wound looked better, but her silver skin had dulled to a worrying gray around the edges. "What I need is to complete Krell's mission," Gina replied, struggling to stand. "We have the evidence. Now we must ensure it reaches the right people." Taiwan helped her up, surprised by how light she felt despite being taller than him. "The embassy." Gina shook her head. "The embassy is compromised. We need to go off-planet." "Off-planet?" Taiwan repeated, his voice rising. "I'm not. I've never." "Krell's ship," Gina reminded him. "You inherited it, remember? It's docked at the private spaceport outside Incheon." 2 hours later, Taiwan found himself staring at a sleek vessel that resembled a teardrop made of midnight blue metal. It sat in a private hangar that his newly acquired credentials had granted them access to, despite the late hour. "You know how to fly this thing, right?" he asked nervously. Gina's lips curved in what he now recognized as her version of a smile. "Of course, and the ship's AI can handle most functions." She pressed her palm against the hull, and a doorway appeared as if melting open. "We should hurry." The interior was surprisingly spacious, with curved walls and seats that adjusted to fit their different physiologies. Gina moved to the pilot's position and began activating systems. Lights glowed to life, and a gentle hum filled the air. "Departure clearance requested," she said to the ship's computer. "Priority diplomatic protocol." "Clearance granted," replied a melodic voice. "Departure window in 3 minutes." Taiwan buckled himself into the co-pilot's seat, trying to calm his racing heart. "I never thought my first trip to space would be as a fugitive." "Consider it an adventure," Gina suggested, though her tone was tense. Krell always said humans crave new experiences. The ship lifted smoothly, rising through an opening roof. Acceleration pressed Taiwan into his seat as they climbed rapidly through the atmosphere. Soon, the black of space surrounded them, and Earth became a blue-white sphere below. "It's beautiful," Taiwan whispered, momentarily forgetting their danger. Gina set a course away from Earth, then engaged what she called drift mode to minimize their energy signature. Only then did she relax slightly, her wound clearly still paining her. "Where are we going?" Taiwan asked. "There's a neutral station in the Proxima system. We can transmit our evidence from there to multiple governments simultaneously." She paused. "But first, there are things you need to know. Things Krell didn't tell you." Gina rose and moved to a small food preparation area, returning with beverages for both of them. The liquid in Taiwan's cup smelled faintly of cinnamon. Krell and I weren't just husband and wife, she began, settling into a seat across from him. We were political partners, members of a reform movement on our homeworld. Reform. Gina's skin rippled with patterns that suggested complex emotions. For centuries, Navarian policy has been one of minimal interaction with other species. We observe, we study, but we maintain distance. Krell, and I believe this was a mistake. That mutual cooperation, especially with humans, could benefit both our peoples. That doesn't sound radical, Taiwan observed. It became radical when we discovered evidence that certain factions were deliberately sabotaging human-Navarian relations, creating incidents, manipulating data. She looked directly at him. We weren't sent to Earth as diplomats. We fled here seeking asylum, with evidence that could expose the conspiracy. Taiwan tried to process this revelation. The Navarian government is behind Project Harmony. Not the government officially, Gina clarified. A powerful faction within it, working with human partners who share their belief that conflict between our species is inevitable. They want controlled escalation now, rather than waiting for humans to advance further technologically. The ship's lights dimmed as it conserved power. In the softer illumination, Gina's silver skin seemed to glow subtly from within. Taiwan found himself noticing how gracefully she moved, how expressive her alien features could be. Why didn't Krell tell me any of this before? He was protecting you, Gina said. And us. The less you knew, the safer you were. Until he died and left me everything, Taiwan pointed out. Gina's expression sobered. He never expected to die so soon. We were gathering final evidence when his shuttle was sabotaged. She hesitated. When he realized what was happening, his final act was to purge all sensitive data from his official devices and secure the most crucial evidence in that crystal. And name me as his successor, Taiwan added. Yes. Her violet eyes studied him carefully. Do you understand why? Taiwan considered. Because I'm an engineer. I can understand the technical aspects of what they're building. Partly, Gina acknowledged. But more importantly, because you have no political connections, no one would suspect you. And because Krell trusted your character. A proximity alert chimed softly. Gina moved quickly to the controls, checking the readings. A ship is following us, she reported. Navarian design, not broadcasting identification. Pursuers. Most likely. Her fingers danced over the controls. I'm changing course. There's a debris field from an old mining operation we can use as cover. The ship accelerated, stars blurring outside the viewports. Taiwan gripped his seat as they swerved and dove through scattered chunks of rock and metal. They're still behind us, Gina reported tensely. And gaining. Can we outrun them? Not in drift mode. If we engage full drives, we'll be more visible, but faster. Do it, Taiwan decided. The ship surged forward with sudden speed that pressed him back into his seat. The pursuing vessel matched their acceleration, now close enough to be visible through the rear viewport. They're preparing to fire, Gina warned. Brace yourself. Energy beams flashed past them, illuminating the cockpit with harsh light. Gina executed a series of evasive maneuvers that sent them spinning through space. We can't outfight them, she said grimly. This is a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. Taiwan studied the ship's systems, his engineer's mind racing. What about the quantum communication array? Could we use it to transmit our evidence now? Not securely. They could intercept it. Another blast rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Shield integrity at 60%, reported the ship's eye. Taiwan unfastened his harness and moved to an access panel. Keep us alive for 5 minutes, he told Gina. I have an idea. Working rapidly, he reconfigured the ship's sensors to emit a focused pulse. On my mark, cut all power except life support, he instructed. That will leave us defenseless, Gina protested. Trust me, Taiwan said, their eyes meeting. After a moment, Gina nodded. Ready? Now. As the ship went dark, Ta-1 triggered his modified sensor array. A massive electromagnetic pulse erupted from their vessel, washing over their pursuer. The enemy ship's lights flickered and died, its momentum carrying it past them. It worked, Gina exclaimed. You disabled their systems. Temporarily, Ta-1 cautioned. Restore power and let's get out of here. As their ship accelerated away, Gina looked at him with newfound respect. Krell was right about you. In the quiet that followed, as stars streaked past the viewports, Ta-1 became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how this shared danger had created an unexpected intimacy between them. Gina seemed to sense it too, her skin flushing with patterns he was beginning to recognize as something akin to human blushing. When this is over, she said softly, what will you do? Return to your old life. The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to voice. Ta-1 realized with surprise that he couldn't imagine returning to his solitary apartment, his routine job, his ordinary existence, not after everything he'd experienced. Not after meeting her. I don't think my old life exists anymore, he admitted. But I'm not sure what my new one looks like yet. Gina's hand moved hesitantly toward his, her 4 fingers resting lightly on his 5. Perhaps, she suggested, we could discover that together. The Grand Assembly Hall of the United Earth Navarian Council gleamed under soft lights. Delegates from both species filled the circular chamber, their murmurs creating a gentle hum of anticipation. At the center podium stood Ta-1, still uncomfortable in formal attire, but no longer out of place among the assembled diplomats. 1 year ago today, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. Evidence was presented to both our governments exposing Project Harmony for what it truly was, not harmony at all, but a conspiracy to drive our peoples toward conflict. He glanced toward Gina, who stood at the side of the stage. Her silver skin shimmered with subtle patterns of pride and encouragement. So much had changed in a year. After their narrow escape in Krell's ship, they had reached the neutral station and transmitted their evidence simultaneously to trusted officials on both worlds. The revelation had initially caused diplomatic chaos. Accusations, denials, threats of severed relations. But as the evidence was verified, and the conspirators identified, cooler heads had prevailed. Today, we celebrate not just the prevention of that conflict, Ta-1 continued, but the founding of the Krell Initiative for Interspecies Cooperation. Applause rippled through the assembly. Using Krell's fortune, which had indeed been substantial, Ta-1 and Gina had established a foundation dedicated to promoting understanding between humans and Navarians. Their first project was already underway, a joint research facility focused on environmental restoration technology that both worlds could benefit from. Krell believed our differences were not obstacles but opportunities, Ta-1 said. That by combining human adaptability with Navarian wisdom, we could achieve more together than either species could alone. As he concluded his speech, Ta-1's gaze found Gina again. The formal occasion required dignity, but he couldn't help the small smile that formed when their eyes met. What had begun as a strange inheritance had become so much more. Later, at the reception, they stood together near a large viewport overlooking Earth. The blue planet hung like a jewel against the blackness of space, clouds swirling across its surface. You spoke well, Gina said, her voice carrying the musical quality that Ta-1 had grown to love. I was terrified, he admitted. Public speaking was never my strength. Another way you've changed. Gina's skin rippled with affectionate amusement. The engineer who once hid in his workshop now addresses interplanetary assemblies. Ambassador Lorne approached them, his blue skin now marked with the golden patterns of his new elevated rank. The former critic had become an ally after the conspiracy was exposed, particularly when it became clear several of his own advisors had been involved. A successful event, he observed. The Council has approved your funding request for the Education Exchange Program. That's wonderful news, Gina replied. Thank you for your support. After the ambassador moved on, Taiwan led Gina to a quieter corner. Do you think Krell would be pleased with what we've accomplished? Gina considered. I think he would be surprised by how quickly events unfolded. But yes, pleased with the outcome. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched Earth rotate slowly below. So much had happened since that rainy night when Taiwan had received the news of Krell's death. The conspiracy exposed. The conspirators brought to justice. The slow, sometimes painful process of building trust between their peoples. And through it all, something neither of them had expected. The gradual transformation of their relationship from reluctant obligation to partnership to something deeper. The transport to Nevaria leaves tomorrow, Gina reminded him. Are you nervous about your first visit to my homeworld? Taiwan nodded. A little. I've studied the customs, but you'll adapt. You always do. She touched his hand lightly, her 4 fingers intertwining with his 5 in what had become their private gesture of affection. The next day found them aboard a diplomatic vessel bound for Nevaria. As the ship entered the atmosphere of Gina's homeworld, Taiwan pressed close to the viewport, taking in the swirling amber clouds and glimpses of landscapes unlike anything on Earth. Forests of crystalline structures that resembled trees, vast plains of what looked like living metal that rippled in the wind. It's beautiful, he breathed. Wait until you see the sky at night, Gina promised. 3 moons create patterns of light that inspired our earliest poetry. Their diplomatic responsibilities kept them busy for days. Meetings with officials, tours of cultural sites, formal presentations about the Foundation's work. Taiwan found himself the object of intense curiosity, the first human many Nevarians had ever met in person. On their 5th evening, Gina took him to a private location away from the capital city, a small dwelling on a cliff overlooking one of Nevaria's silver oceans. The structure seemed to grow from the rock itself, its walls transparent on the ocean side to showcase the spectacular view. This was my family home, Gina explained as they stood on the terrace. Before I joined the reform movement. Before I met Krell. It's peaceful, Taiwan observed as waves crashed against the rocks below. I wanted to show you this place because... Gina hesitated, unusual for her normally composed demeanor. Because I wanted you to see where I came from, who I was before. The 3 moons rose as they talked, casting the landscape in shades of silver and blue. Gina pointed out constellations with names Taiwan struggled to pronounce, telling stories of Nevarian heroes and ancient beliefs. As the largest moon reached its zenith, bathing them in pale light, Gina turned to face him directly. There is a Nevarian tradition, she said, her voice soft but clear against the sound of the waves. When 2 people wish to form a lifelong bond, they share their deepest truth beneath the full moons. Taiwan felt his heart quicken. What is your deepest truth? Gina's skin glowed with patterns he had come to recognize as her most intense emotions. That what began as duty has become choice. That I would choose you, Taiwan, even if tradition and circumstance had not brought us together. The weight of her words settled around them like a mantle. Taiwan reached for her hands, holding them gently in his own. My deepest truth, he replied, is that I never believed in fate until I inherited a fortune, a spaceship, and a beautiful alien wife. His smile widened. Now I'm not so sure. Gina's laugh, a sound like crystal chimes, rang out across the silver waters. So poetic for an engineer. Later, as they stood together watching shooting stars streak across Nevaria's night sky, Taiwan reflected on the strange path his life had taken. From ordinary engineer to inheritor of an alien fortune. From reluctant Shasmakar to devoted partner. From earth-bound human to citizen of 2 worlds. Krell's final gift had not been wealth or property or even a beautiful wife. It had been possibility, the chance to live a life beyond the boundaries of what Taiwan had thought possible. As Gina's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing, Taiwan sent a silent thought of gratitude to his friend among the stars. for the inheritance that had changed everything, for the conspiracy that had brought them together, for the future that stretched before them, as vast and unexplored as the space between their worlds. "What are you thinking?" Gina asked, noting his contemplative expression. "That some inheritances can't be measured in money or property," Ta-One replied. "And that I'm very glad I was in Krell's will." Gina's skin glowed with patterns of happiness as she leaned against him. Above them, the 3 moons of Nevaria continued their ancient dance across the alien sky, witnesses to a new beginning that crossed the boundaries between worlds.